Hello, everybody, and welcome to this conversation with the lovely Lara Latcham. And yes, I had to get some alliteration in the first few seconds. Um, we're going to keep everybody that's joined just off screen at the moment, just while we introduce tonight's topic. Laura introduces her books, and then we've got a series of 10 questions that we're going to be asking you all. Well, I'm going to be asking Lara, and then we've got some questions that we'd like to discuss with you towards the end of the event. So, those of you that are here with us live will go through those questions together as a group, and then you will be sent them. Those of you who have registered but have been unable to make it this evening, you'll be sent them on via email for you to deep dive into by yourself. So, Lara Latcham, author of Estella. Oh, this book. Please tell us a bit more about the book, Lara, please.
Well, thank you for the very enthusiastic introduction. So, Estella is a book about a woman who is a highly sensitive person. And I've never seen anything in literature before where somebody has tried to explain what it's like to be a highly sensitive person. And having only sort of discovered for myself that I am actually a highly sensitive person myself, I only discovered about 10 years ago. Um, I began to realize that it would be interesting to deep dive into it and think about it. And in the process of thinking about wanting to tell a story about somebody who's highly sensitive, I realized that there are many different versions of myself that I use at different times in my life. And there is a particular version of myself of when I was about 30 years old, when I was probably the most confident I've ever been in my life. And so she comes up quite a lot when I have to deal with something that the present day me thinks, oh, holy moly, I really can't deal with this. That personality comes forward. But what I also realized was that there is a 7-year-old version of myself that when things don't go the way that I would like them to go, she comes out immediately to have a good old strop about it. And that my adult version is always trying to muffle her because I know that it's not acceptable in many situations to kind of say exactly how pissed off you are about those situations. So Estella is a novel
I'm
about
just
a woman.
thinking I kind of need to learn that.
Well, no, you see, the thing is, I'm not sure that we really do need to muffle it. I think sometimes that does need to come out, but it needs to be what I think is you can't be too ghastly to people because there are people out there who are really caring for us. And if we let that person out to those people, then there's something wrong with it. But there are occasions, and you see it sometimes, don't you, in public, somebody has literally just the last straw has broken their back and it
Mm.
comes out. And it is genuinely a very much younger version of themselves who's just like, life is unfair. I don't believe it. I don't want this to happen. Anyway, so Estella, the story is about a woman who has seven different versions of herself, and as she goes through her life, these different versions come out to help her. And the present day version is somebody who's very, very frightened of who she is. And the story is about her coming to terms with who she is, accepting who she is, and actually just letting that be. And through that process, not too big a spoiler, through that process, the eighth version of herself and what might indeed be the final version of herself comes out. So, yeah, so
I
that's,
love this book. I loved it.
and
Like I
it's
could
not,
relate to it so much. However, my 7-year-old self isn't throwing a tantrum. She's getting up to lots of mischief,
mm,
and wanting to just run free and wild and feral and just and she does run my life a lot because I'm like, okay, like what does my inner child want? Like
mm.
what are we doing today? What like what I mean, I would love to go out and climb trees again, but sadly, my almost
Those days
50-year-old
are over.
self is catching yeah, yeah, they are. But I can encourage the little boys. that I saw climbing the tree the other day when I took Chewie to the park. I was like, yeah, they're climbing trees. And then the teacher came along and went, you're not supposed to be doing that. And I was like, seriously? Like, I
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
wanted to,
But
yes.
you know, when people take positions of authority like teaching, you know, they're in a position where they have to do that. I think that's very interesting because my 14-year-old self is that the one that's like, okay, I'm giving myself permission to have fun and I'm giving myself permission to do everything that I want to do. And
My 14-year-old self was the one that was the most insecure.
okay, yeah. So I would say my 7-year-old self was the most insecure because I it was about that time that I realized that adults only really love you if you behave in a certain way, and
Mm.
that a lot of the way that I wanted to behave was not going to get me the reactions and the love that I was looking for. So,
But
my
that's the
seven
beauty of the book. Sorry, that's the beauty of the book, though, that there's so many parts of us that we will be able to tap into, and that power, regardless of which scenario we're in, the power of tapping into a previous version of self is such a game changer. And it works for both men and women because
mm,
it's not, this is genderless in so many ways. And that's why I loved it when you came up with the design of the two hands. Because when we tried to make them as masculine, feminine, but as unisex as possible, because it could be
yeah,
two friends reaching out, two male friends reaching out to feminine hands, a male to a woman, older to younger, and all of those vice versa. And it just speaks on so many levels, the book that you've done, that
yeah,
you've created.
I think that's an interesting point, though, about the genderless thing, because Philip Pullman has just released the last of the final trilogy in the kind of Northern Lights thing. So it's the Secret Commonwealth, and the third book has just come out, and in it, the main character Lyra, who is this extraordinary character, comes up with this term which I'm absolutely obsessed with now: binary absolutism. And we've got to really fight against the whole idea of binary absolutism. So there's men and there are women. But are there? So there, are there no shades of grey in between? What are we
Apparently, there are
completely denying
50.
certain parts of our society? There's wrong and there's right. Well, again, there's so many shades of grey in there. And I think that what I was trying to do with the characters, although the characters, some of them are gendered, some of them are not gendered, um, what I was trying to do with those characters was just talk about how they're fighting to get to their best self and to enjoy life to the best of their ability without any harm coming to any other people around them.
Nice. Well, on that note, should we dive into the questions? Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, not that you've given too much of a spoiler away, but in your experience, what does it really mean to be too kind? And how do we recognize it before it becomes harmful? And I believe you've done a re bit of research on what the definition of kindness is for us.
Well, yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it, that when you're talking about something, you want to go back to the basics and make sure that you know exactly what it is that you're talking about. So, if you look at a definition of kindness, it's about being friendly, it's about being compassionate, thoughtful, considerate, all of those things. And I genuinely believe, and this is something that Estella believes in the novel as well. I genuinely believe that you can't be too kind to people. Now, I know that lots of people will say, actually, I have an example of how you can be too kind to people and what happened to me as a result of being too kind." But I really do feel that kindness, if we don't attack each day that we have with kindness in mind, what we get back from our day and what we get back from other people will be affected by that. And there are days where, absolutely honestly, you cannot even dredge kindness up if you really try because you're having such a bad day. But particularly in the work that I do, where I'm dealing with people all the time on a daily basis, and a lot of the people that I'm dealing with are young people aged 16 to 18. If I don't go into my day with the intention of being kind to people, very quickly my day will escalate into confrontation.
Do you think that would be different if the people you were dealing with were adults of an age range in the like mid 30s to mid 50s?
I don't know. I think, you've got to bear in mind that although I deal with students who are 16 to 18, I'm surrounded by adults as well. And I have a team. I'm in a team of 15 people. I'm one of 15 people. And I find probably more hostility from adults than I do from young people. Um, Sorry, you wanted to say something?
I did. But I've also got a sore throat from being ill last week, so I'm trying not to cough at you all. Um, but I was just wanting to pause there because, as we know, that because you and I have both done a lot of inner child work, and those of us that have done a lot of personal development, we know that a lot of the time, as you were saying, your 7-year-old is ruling like, throwing a tantrum. Do you find that the inner child is dominating a lot of adults and making them behave in certain ways? Because you I mean when you say you genuinely believe you can't be too kind to people, and yes, people will disagree with that. I am one that I disagree, but this is why I love having conversations with you because we do disagree on many things, but obviously we join together on so many beautiful bridges. And with these adults that we encounter in our daily lives, whether it's someone that, we meet in the coffee shop or in the street, or, someone that we, you know, wherever it is that we're meeting them, we have little children running big corporations, because people haven't done the deep inner work. So how are you managing that within your daily life with the children in adults' bodies, but they're actually presented as adults?
I think it's very interesting, and one of the things that I consider always when I'm thinking about other people, and if you're dealing with somebody and they are difficult to deal with, one of the things that I often think about is when I was a child, um, I was not in a family that was particularly kind. Okay, so my parents loved me very much. They were amazing people. They gave me fantastic opportunities in life, but they weren't kind people. If they felt that you'd done something wrong, they were pretty obvious about it and they could be quite nasty. One of the biggest punishments we had as children, my brother and I, was that we would be sent to Coventry and essentially just ignored
For those
until,
of you
you
who
know,
don't know what that term means, sent to Coventry doesn't mean we're sending them to the Midlands of Britain. It just means we're excluding them, we're not talking to them. Just
so yeah, so that would be the main punishment that mum and dad would have for my brother and I was if we did anything that they weren't particularly happy about or they felt critical about, they wouldn't speak to us. And it could go for days sometimes, where they wouldn't speak to us. And
that's quite
you
harsh.
would be kind of like second guessing, do I have to apologize again at this point or, whatever. So but the problem is that when we meet an adult, we have no idea what their childhood was. We have no idea what their experience of life is. We have no idea what happened 5 minutes ago, 5 days ago, 5 weeks ago, 5 months ago.
Mm.
And therefore, I always go along the lines that you have no idea what somebody is trying to deal with. You have no idea what their burden is in life. And therefore, I would rather choose to be kind towards that person And if they choose not to be kind to me, I don't want to withdraw my kindness, because it might be that a lack of kindness and a lack of compassion in their life is what is making them behave like a complete bastard.
Mm,
Yeah. So sometimes I kind of think, okay, it's like the thing that you learn with customer service. So one of the first rules of customer service is that your customer is always right, and therefore you kill them with kindness. Okay, so when they're wrong in your eyes or in your mind, you just keep going, yes, I completely understand. I completely understand. What can I do for you to make this better? You know, just being kind to people all of the time, because kindness in the end, at the bottom line, if you've been kind to somebody and they've been horrible to you, you can go away kind of going, well, that was a bastard thing, wasn't it? They weren't very nice to me. But you know what? I didn't retaliate. Do you know what? I remained kind all the way through that conversation. It takes a long time to disassociate yourself from any resentment that you might feel when you don't get kindness in return. So I think when I was first in customer service, which was very young because my parents had a bookshop and I started working in the bookshop behind the counter at 11 years of age, when I was nice to somebody and they weren't nice back to me, I wanted to retaliate. I basically wanted to kind of like just be bolshy back to them. But whenever I did that, I would then just have a bad conscience about it afterwards and think, well, you know, I'm I just sort of dropped to their level and I was nasty back to them. And it's interesting because one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in the last sort of 5 to 10 years is the difference between responding and reacting. And I
mm,
think that desire to kind of go, oh, if you're going to be fucking horrible to me, then I'm going to be fucking horrible to you. Okay, that's a reaction. Whereas responding is like, gosh, they're not being very kind to me, are they? Um, does it really matter? Shall I just continue being kind? Should we just see where we go with this? Maybe I can turn them around. And I think that is what I think when you meet out. So we have no idea what their childhood is. We have no idea what anybody is carrying around with them, because despite what they tell us, they're probably still not giving us the full picture. And
mm,
lots of people don't want to tell you the negative stuff that's happening in their lives. The amount of kids that I work with who, I might meet them 4 or 5 times. And each time I meet them, they go, yeah, 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 loving college, loving this, loving that. Everything's fantastic. And then the sixth time I meet them, they go, I'm really, really struggling. And I have been from the start of term.
mm.
And at that point, I think, hallelujah. Okay, we've got somewhere now, because I've been aware that things probably haven't been quite right. And you just keep asking that question. You keep being
Okay.
kind, you keep being compassionate, and there it goes.
So obviously we know that there are certain situations where being kind to somebody um, seems utterly, and this is not on the list, but this has come up for me.
Okay.
Um, um, because yes, we've got, and I suppose it is related to question two that I wanted to ask. There are only 10 questions, people, but obviously I like to, those of you who know me, you know that I love to dance in conversation. Um, and there's this this question, oh, well, what if someone has just murdered your child, or someone has just raped your mother, or burnt your house down, or, how do you respond to that with kindness? Because you're in the depths of your grief and your trauma. This person has just done something, absolutely abhorrent. That maybe they've been, your brother has been abusing your children, like, pedophile, and people wanting us to be kind to, pedophiles, and you're just thinking that, I mean, I know through my training, and someone who helps people through trauma and like the narrative coaching. But is there a point where being kind, I've got no kindness for people like you. Yes, I don't know what they've been through. Yes, they were probably abused themselves. Yes, they've probably been through huge amounts of trauma. They don't have the life skills. But what's your answer to that?
Well, I don't know that there is an answer to it. The only thing that I think about it, though, is that what I'm concerned about is that if we choose to retain our anger, our trauma, our hatred when something like that happens. So, for example, somebody does something very bad to somebody who is very, very close and that you love so very much. Obviously, you're going to have a reaction in which you're going to feel that anger. And I think it's actually worse when it's somebody that's done something to somebody that you love rather than somebody who's done something to you. However, what I've been exploring in myself in the last few years is that if we choose to hold on to the feeling that we have of hatred, resentment, anger, all of these things, if we choose to hold on to all of that, the only person we're damaging is ourselves. Because that hatred, that anger, whatever, that's not going to impact on the person who's perpetrated whatever the bad deed is.
Mm.
So in those cases, it's not necessarily about being kind to that person. It's about being kind to yourself and saying, I acknowledge that this person did this really abhorrent thing and that somebody that I love or myself was affected by this thing.
Or anyone.
Yeah. However, I don't want to go through the rest of my life limiting myself by the anger that I'm feeling or the upset that I'm feeling or the fear that I now have because this thing happened.
Mm.
And, you know, um, I was very lucky to work with Tracy Hamilton with trauma
Just
release.
amazing. Big
And
up Tracy Hamilton.
I had I had this epiphany with her, which was I had spent my entire life going, oh, and he did this to me, and she did that to me, and my mum and dad did this to me. And, I am the mess that I am today because all of these people did this to me. And yes, to a certain extent, they did do it to me. But apart from stuff that happened in early childhood, and if I look at my intimate relationships, apart from the first time somebody did something to me, I then went on to let people do things to me.
Mm.
So I suddenly kind of had this appalling epiphany. It was not a good day. I may not have been kind to people that day because I was having a real struggle. And I remember sitting in front of Tracy and just going, it's all my fault. I let this stuff happen. Because the first time that somebody you're in a relationship with does something bad and you tell them, really don't want you to do that again, or I'm walking away because that's unacceptable. I wasn't like that. I was like, oh, I didn't like that. I don't want this relationship to end. I'll just pretend it didn't happen. And let's just move forward and do the definition of madness, keep going on, doing the same thing, expecting different results. So I think so much of this is about taking responsibility for ourselves. So, we can talk about, okay, I gave kindness to somebody and I didn't get kindness back. Oh, boo-hoo. All right. But you were kind, you did your thing. All
It's not
right. So
competition.
then think carefully about your boundaries with that person in the future, about
Mm.
how much kindness you give. And also, sorry, I'm on a bit of a roll now.
No, I'm loving it. I keep looking down, going, well, she's answered that question, she's answered that question. Well, I think she's covered that one.
So
I'm
I
being
think,
kind. I'm letting you ramble.
yeah, well, thank you, but I probably need reining in slightly. So
Okay.
I think also that one of the things that we really need to talk about is what our motivation for being kind is. Are you just somebody who would like everybody, including your own lives, to be that much nicer, and therefore you choose to be kind to people? Or are you being kind to people because you think that there's a return on being kind to people? And I think that that's one of the questions that we've talked about in the past, which I think is very interesting. So if you're kind to somebody just because you kind of think it makes my day and their day easier if I am, that seems to me to be the right way to do kindness. If you're giving kindness to people, and I am so guilty of this in the past, I sometimes fall back into it now, but I don't as much because I've released quite a lot of trauma. If you're kind to somebody and you're thinking, ah, oh, but you see, if I'm kind to them, they'll love me. Or if I'm kind to them, then they'll be kind back to me. If you're doing it on that basis, you're doing it wrong. That's not what kindness is.
Or if I'm kind to them, I might get something from them.
Yeah, a
Self-serving, yeah.
return of any kind. Yeah, yeah.
But also, I think that, well, it's not, I think, I know that sometimes when I'm being kind to somebody, um, and that it's not coming back to me, one of the first things, so for example, and my listeners are used to what I'm about to share, and I don't know if some of your listeners will be up for this. Um, but there was sexual violence in my past. And one of the things that shocks a lot of people is because we don't know whether he spiked me or whether someone else spiked me and he just took advantage of the situation. We don't know. Um, but we do know his part in it. And for me, it's, well, I have to consider why he did it. Was he too drunk to comprehend? And was my behavior under being spiked such that it was confusing? None of us know because of how drugs affect us. Sometimes, was I just comatose? Um, Unlikely with the injuries that I had. But again, it's like I give consideration. My ex-husband cheated on me the whole 18 years we were together. And I was like, well, he made his choice, and I walked away and I said, the boys will be your judge, not some random dude in a wig and a black gown in a courtroom that knows nothing about us. They will judge you. And I know for a fact that if me and my ex-husband were going to go to the law courts, we'd probably still be debating and bickering in a divorce court now, some 13 years later. And again, it's knowing when to reflect on the situation and to consider what must have they have been going through. Um, there are some people out there who commit sexual violence on other people that are just horrendous, evil individuals. But my thinking is always what made them that way?
Mm, mm,
What fractured their conscience in such a way from, what was that break in their morality, their was it ever developed as a child? Were they neglected as a child? Were they beaten and abused as a child? Or was this, so many pressures in adulthood that just came? And also if we're being kind to people, um, are we keeping people stuck in that? Um, because when I play this out, and I've been thinking about this conversation ever since we first had that conversation, like weeks ago, um, and we were discussing it with the mug for Estella, can you be too kind is the slogan you've got on your mug. And with the Matryoshka dolls, and you just when you're kind to somebody who, like for example, somebody that's not doing very much, they're not getting ahead in life, they don't really want to. There's a yes, we know there's a reason behind that. Um, but if we're being kind to them always and not keeping them, holding them accountable,
Okay, so
is this
I
tough
get
love,
complete.
tough kindness?
I absolutely. So I completely get where you're coming from. And in my work, I'm working with 16 to 18-year-olds. I'm in pastoral care. So what I have to do is I have to do a progress review with a young person.
Mm,
Progress review with the young person is looking at how they're doing in their subjects, what they've achieved, what they haven't achieved. Um, and I think that you can do things with kindness which are difficult for people. So the conversation that I actually had a conversation yesterday with a young man, where I said, okay, so look, this is how it is. You've got your results in from the November assessments. Okay. So do you kind of want to fail, or would you like to do really well? And so he said, well, I don't necessarily want to do really well, but I'd like to pass. So I said, okay. So the thing is, if you want to do that, you're going to have to change a lot of your behaviors. So what you're doing at the moment, not working. Okay. So you're going to have to change. You're going to have to do some stuff to get where you want to be. So what is it that you think that you need to do here?
mm,
And so he kind of said, well, mum and dad, they shouted at me last night and they think I should. And I said, no, 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 I'm not interested in what they think. And I'm sorry that they shouted at you. That's not really going to help you much. But I'm here to help. So tell me, what do you think you can do to improve this? So your
mm,
next set of assessments are in March. What are we going to do between now and March that's going to make the outcome of the March assessments different from the November assessments? And so you being kind is sometimes actually saying to somebody, you know what? You are well out of order. You really
mm,
need to get yourself sorted out, but you do it with kindness. And I have said to young people in the past when I'm dealing with them, and I've said it to adults as well, look, I'm about to say something to you which I don't think you want to hear, but please believe me, it's coming from a place of kindness and love. And somebody's got to say this to you, and I've chosen to be the person to do that.
mhm.
So, so really, because that's something that I often say to students. I will actually say to them, look, I love you to pieces, but bloody hell, will you do some work?
Yeah.
You know, and I never raise my voice, but I can be quite emphatic, but I always do it from a place of kindness and love.
Because and I'm trying to obviously look at all of the different things that you're saying and pull them all together. Um, because we're covering a lot of ground here and a lot of key issues because we're talking about, masking some of the self-care issues, that some people might not be able to take care of themselves and make that progress. We're talking about maybe masking some of our own things to help other people because even though we might want to shake them and just say, wake up and get on with it, we're being kind and, patient, show, and because sometimes I mean, having been a teacher, um, of the of the little 4 or 5 year old babies, and I love them. And yes, I have so many children I don't know what to do with. And the 8 and 9 year olds and the 14 and 15 year olds. These are very key ages. And they're probably not getting the support that they need at home, or the parents are not at home. They're being raised by nannies, or au pairs, and or they're raising themselves,
Mm,
living in some really horrendous situations. And when we're looking at being too kind to people, or showing them kindness, some people don't respond well to kindness.
No, completely.
Because of
That's another
their
thing that
environment.
we've talked about. So I'm very aware in myself that until about 3 years ago, whenever I was offered kindness from somebody, I would be immediately suspicious.
Mm, me
Um,
too.
I would also feel,
What do you
and this is
want?
this is a really weird thing, I would feel undermined by it.
Mm.
Because
Oh
I felt
yes.
that if somebody was offering me kindness, it was obvious that I was not coping, and therefore they were offering me kindness. And you know, what the hell? Don't criticize me. Don't make out that I can't cope.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting because I never responded to it. I never considered that they
mm,
thought I couldn't cope. It was just like, what do you want? Why are you being kind?
yeah, so there is that aspect of it. I mean, there's like a suspicion that arises in your
Mm.
mind. Oh, so why are you, why are you offering me this kindness? What
If
is
my
it that
own mum's not kind to me,
what's
why would
the
anybody else be?
yeah, no, completely, completely. I think that was partly my thing was that, I was not brought up in a household where, somebody would kind of go, "Oh, look, let me help you out with that. I'll sort you out that, that's." I wasn't used to that. So when
Mm.
somebody offered, it was like somebody was saying to me, "Oh, you obviously can't do that, so shall I do it?" Um, and also something that I struggle with hugely, which I know that lots of people out there struggle with, is self-love. So I've always had a very negative uh, self-image of myself and a very negative self-voice inside my head and one thing or another. So when somebody would offer me help, the voice inside my head was very much the voice of my childhood, which is, well, why can't you do it for yourself? Why are you expecting someone else to do it for you? And why are they offering to do it? Because if they're offering to do it, then you're obviously looking incompetent.
Mm.
Um, so I think kindness, it's not just kindness though. I think if we don't receive certain things in our childhood, it's very difficult later on to then accept them in your life. And
Mm.
um, I my brother and I have talked about this a lot, that our childhood was a very kind of sterile sort of childhood. We weren't hugged, and we were expected to be very quiet, and not to be obtrusive. We were only allowed into certain parts of the house at certain parts of the day, and we were expected mostly to be in our bedrooms. And and we would be invited to come out of our bedrooms and partake in meals or things that were happening. But so both of us kind of had a reaction to that, which my brother's reaction was that as soon as he was out of the home, he was in relationships, living in shared houses, sharing everything with everybody. And mine was very much like, I don't know how to interact with people. I'm
Mm.
not sure how to have a proper relationship with anybody. And I explore this in Estella. She has a lot of, as with most people's first novels, she has a lot of traits of me in her. And I used it to explore those issues that I had from a very early age. I left home at 17, went to live in a bedsit, shared a room with somebody in a bedsit in London, and I had no idea what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable when you shared a room with somebody. And I would end up doing things like doing their laundry and doing their ironing for them, and they would be mortified that I had washed their underpants. So there are all these
Mm.
things that you kind of like you slowly find out as you grow up. But if you come from a household where you've been offered affection, kindness, compassion, or whatever, then you end up being a different human being straight away, going out from home.
Mm.
So kindness, like all of those other things, if you don't experience it as a child, as a young person, it must be very difficult for people to know how to be.
Mm.
And when we consider also the amount of learning differences that we experience in life these days. So I have on my books at the moment, I have 228 students. And of the 228 students, around 60 of them have a learning difference. So for those with learning differences, it's again another case of, rather than reacting when they say something which is possibly construed as rude, it's thinking in terms of what's their experience, what have they experienced, do they have any idea that what they're saying could be rude? And it's very interesting when you say to somebody, particularly a 16-year-old, you kind of go, so what you just said to me, if I said it to you, how would you feel about it? And they kind of go, yeah, it's all right. And you then have an idea of how they've been spoken to up until that point.
Mm.
And so if you then say to them, how would you feel if I said it this way? And you change it into something which is a little bit more positive, has a little bit more compassion, a little bit more kindness in it. And they kind of go, I'd feel quite good if you said that to me. And so I sort of say to them, well, so sometimes the words that we choose and the tone of voice that we choose can make a really big difference to how we say things to people and how people react to what we've said. And it's really interesting because the vast majority of people kind of go, yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Okay, so bringing that up, I'm going to jump in here with a couple of things. I want to explore the self-love and the self-talk and being kind to ourselves. But looking at it linguistically, as you know, I've done a huge amount of traveling around the world across linguistic patterns, lived in the Arab world, Latin America, parts of Africa. Um, and the way in which the energetic signatures and the way in which the languages are spoken, I've realized that, I mean, I've always been quite direct. Let's not just, let's call it what it is. Bull in a china shop has been, referred to me before. Um, and I've been called tactless. And for me, I'm never, whenever I say anything, I'm never saying it to be nasty or to be rude to people. Again, it was just how I was raised and how I was spoken to. Um, but then as I've got older, um, the way in which I speak now has definitely changed. Because if I grew up, if I speak like how I grew up, I'd be speaking like this all the time, right? And I wouldn't be finishing a lot of words. And every farmer ends up speaking like that whenever I'm reading a children's book, or maybe a pirate might be a bit more. But I realized that if I wanted to get on in the world, having my deep farmer accent wasn't really going to pay me very many dividends. But also, when you're learning a different language, especially when you've got a different character set like Arabic and you've got a different energy and a different rhythm, you have to, sometimes it changes. So I've only been back in Britain 18 months. I found it incredibly difficult to engage with British people that do not speak a different language. And I think that I've been very blessed to work with yourself because you have lived overseas, you have learned a different language. And um, it's when somebody has that, there's a bit more of an understanding and a forgiveness. And I remember when I came back from living out in Egypt, we've just been living through the Egyptian uprising. I was at a business event. It was the first business event that I'd been to. It was an AGM. Um, and there was one of my friends who I hadn't seen for the years. We'd lived, like I said, through the Egyptian uprising. Um, all I'd been speaking was Arabic predominantly, unless it was American English with, or we it was Egyptian English, which was Egyptian American. Um, and I would come out with things like "ida better," and people that are Egyptian, when they hear "ida better," they will laugh because I'm white English, and they'll be like, "What did she just say to me? Really? That's really Egyptian. Like that's proper." Uh, like you would only really know that if you've lived like amongst the Egyptians. And But I remember asking a question, and the woman that was sat next to me, we'd been friends for many years. She had learnt, she spoke three or four languages, lived in at least as many countries. She goes, you were just incredibly rude. And she was so upset with me. And I was just like, and so I started going on a bit paranoid. I'm like, no, I wasn't, replaying it in my head. And then what I realized is my friends who, in the business community who were from the Arab world, they came, oh, can't you tell you've been living in the Arab world, girl? Right. And it was just so to them, it was very warming. It was very, it reminded them of home. But because this other lady had only learned European languages, um, the softer Europeans, and I was speaking English words, but with an Egyptian rhythm. There was a conflict there, and so I do believe that the way in which we speak is not just dependent on who we are as a person, but also the languages and the la rhythm of languages that we've learned. And you know, when you're learning a language, you actually have to be quite precise because there are some words in certain languages, if you do not say them accurately, like if you say my name in Arabic one way, if I say Fajr, that means sunrise. If I say Fajr, it means whore. So we have to be really quite accurate on how we're pronouncing things. Um, and so the concentration it takes to actually communicate with some people, or like when I've come back to Britain, I've gone, you know what? We're not even at the same level of understanding. I can't even have a conversation with you because if you're here, if your starting point on this conversation on this topic is here and mine is up here, or vice versa, then I either need to go and do some work to actually bring myself up to your level, or you need to be able to be a little bit more forgiving and bring yourself down to my level, and again, vice versa. So I think we need to, that actually has to come into a level of kindness and understanding as well.
Well, I
Um,
think that's something which is, I would add to the whole thing about when you're talking to somebody. So, for example, in Herefordshire, we have a lot of refugees,
mm,
and a lot of my students are refugees. So they're with us from the Ukraine, they're with us from Syria, they're with us from different places, and I'm in a team of 15 people that deal with pastoral care, and I'm constantly shocked by the fact that some of my colleagues don't understand the extent to which some of our students have been affected by their life experiences,
mm,
but also that they do not recognize how amazing these students are to be getting good marks in a language which is not their own.
mm. You know,
So,
something
and I
that's not
think
their
unless,
own
like yourself
deeply
and myself,
memories and
you've been
trauma and
somewhere and you've worked in a language which is not your own. I think there's a kind of lack of understanding that actually the achievement is huge.
mm,
Um,
especially when you're processing trauma.
oh, completely, because so that also adds to the whole thing because obviously our mental health affects our ability to be kind. It affects our ability to process information. It affects our ability to learn. Trauma is a huge barrier in our lives,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons why in Estella I talk about the different ways that people process their trauma, and that the only really useful way to process it is to release it.
Okay, so
Um, Sorry, go ahead.
no, I just want to make sure that we're covering all the key areas that we wanted to cover because I know that we're coming up to 11 minutes on the hour. So that gives us only 41 minutes left. So we are here for 90 minutes. So let's make the most of it because we have good Q&A afterwards. Um, so the idea of being too kind to yourself and obviously to others, my interpretation of that being a bit of a nerd, being kind to myself means learning. And it also it does not just, you know, giving myself a manicure. For those of you who've noticed, yes, yacht racing season is over. Dawny's having a manicure. But you know, some people think that self-love and self-care is just having a massage going, you know, or but for me it's about feeding your growth, feeding, you know, like if I am tired, especially at the moment. I've had a really tough year, like processing a lot of trauma. I've been studying a lot and, growing the business. I'm like, I'm in the menopause. I'm like, my body's like, you need to nap, Dawn. I'm like, I'm going for a nap. When my body tells me I need a nap, I'm going for a nap. Now, I lived in Latin America and the Arab world for a long time. I love my siestas and my afternoon naps. I've got into a rhythm, and I'll probably stay up till really late. And when we're being kind to ourselves, especially as women, because our bodies change a lot. We have to get used to, the boobs and the hips and the bum when we're going through puberty or lack of. And then we're going through the puberty and like the periods, and then once a month we have some of us have, we have a pair of fat jeans, and then we have our or period jeans, as some of us call it, because our bellies really, they really swell up during our periods. And then there are those that, we have to get used to our bodies once they've been through pregnancy. And maybe we've had to have a C-section. And then as we get into our older years, and then our bodies are changing again. I mean, I've put on quite a few kilos since perimenopause has kicked me. I'm like, where, like, seriously, I'm working out, I'm eating more protein, I'm getting the naps, I'm drinking the water, I'm doing all the things I should be doing. Why am I still gaining weight? How do you still gain weight when you're walking about 3 miles a week? Sorry, 3 miles a day, and swimming probably about 5 kilometers a week. How are you still gaining weight? And the kindness that we have to give to ourselves, and not the criticisms, and those nasty thoughts, because when other people are unkind to us, as Julia Roberts once said in that fabulous film, Pretty Woman, the bad stuff's easier to believe because of the
No,
amount of
completely, and
kindness.
I get where you're coming from with that, and I think that I'm less comfortable about talking about being kind to yourself than I am about talking about being kind to other people, because I'm not particularly good at it. I'm getting better. I am improving, but that's actually the thing that I'm writing at the moment, is very much about that, and the practicing what you preach. So being the same person as you are to other people, to yourself.
Your own best
Um,
friend.
yeah. So, but also when we talk about, tough kindness, which is the kind of like, this is coming from a place of kindness, it's coming from a place of love, but actually what you need to do is, or can we talk together to find a way of you moving forward to get where we want to go? It's that conversation. So I've been having that conversation with myself for probably 2 years now, in which I have been saying to myself, look, I'm really trying hard here to love myself and to be kind to myself and to do that in a way that I would do to other people.
Mm.
And I think that can be very, very hard. So one of the things that happens in Estella is that she's constantly second guessing why people are doing things.
Because
And
she absorbs the emotions of so many of those around her. And that is one of the key messages that you wanted to get across in the book. And there's quite a challenging scene in there, for some of us that have been through similar issues with, as Estella have. How do we distinguish the true self-care and the overindulgence of our own emotions, or the avoidance of them? Because if you're avoiding being kind to yourself, but you're being kind to others, some would say that would make you a hypocrite.
no, completely. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And I think that that's something that I'm very aware of in
Mm.
myself. Um, so I would think very seriously about being unkind to somebody. I would think about why I was doing it, and I would probably come to the conclusion that it was simply coming from a place of anger or frustration or jealousy, something like that.
Mm.
And therefore, I would try very hard not to be unkind to somebody. Whereas I will be unkind to myself simply looking at myself in the mirror. And so one of the reasons why I'm going through this journey at the moment of trying to translate what I do to other people into what I do to myself is because I just suddenly realized that it is hypocritical that I will give to others, but I won't give to myself. And I think it's that journey. I mean, I'm 58, and it's taken this long to get to a point where I actually want to be kind to myself, whereas I have wanted to be kind to other people virtually my whole life.
Mm.
And I think that this has a lot to do with conditioning. So one of the things that we've talked about in the past is how we learn about kindness. So we might experience it, but if we don't experience it, we might be pushed by adults in our lives when we're children to be kind towards other people. So, particularly if parents or adults are arbitrating in a dispute between children, they will tell you to be kind to one another. Um, and it's how we interpret that and what it is. I think a lot of kindness that I see in the world is not really kindness,
Mm.
really people who
Performative.
are conditioned to behave in a particular way. Um, and that's why you get to the point where people say, oh, well, I've wasted so much kindness on that person and I've got nothing back from it. And all they've done is just give me grief. And you kind of think, right, okay, so already we've identified from what they've said that they were being kind because they thought that there would be some return on it.
Mm.
Or they have misinterpreted how much they feel that they can give in kindness. So this is another aspect of kindness. You can only be kind if you've got the kindness to give. And if you haven't got the kindness to give and you still try and give it, you're doing a disservice both to yourself and the person that you're trying to give the kindness to.
Okay.
So one of the things that we talk about quite frequently is you can't give from an empty cup. So if you don't have anything to give, you haven't anything to give, and that means whether it's kindness or anger or retribution, if you haven't got it, you can't give it.
Mm.
So that's why I suddenly realized that I had to do my self kindness because I was giving and giving and giving. And I got to the point where I just didn't have anything to give anymore.
Yeah.
So my crisis was not the last August that we've just been through, but the August before, where I suddenly, after years and years of being a carer for parents, I just really realized that I never wanted to care for anyone else again. And the part of the point about that and part of my realization was that was because I had given more than I had to give. And
Mm.
therefore I was in a deficit. I'd reached negative point at that point.
Mm.
And so therefore I was completely depleted. I had no interest really in moving forward at all, had no interest in doing anything. But luckily I was doing my trauma release at the time. And I was able then to go into that, find out where that was coming from, release it. And then my font of caring, my font of kindness, my font of caring about fellow human beings got renewed through that trauma release. But I am now very, very aware of the balance and where am I? Where's my bucket at this particular moment? How much is in my bucket? How much can I give? And in what situations do I just have to take a step back and go, you know what? I would be doing everybody a disservice if I engage with this because I just don't think I have enough to engage with this.
Mm. I actually said to someone recently, because when we just recently published Owning Our Ovaries, one of the ladies in the book sent me a bottle of wine and a plant. I'm trying my best to be kind to the plant. Plants are not safe in my hands. I've killed mint and I've killed ivy. Would you believe? Um, uh, Flowers are great. Plants, not unless they're herbs and I can eat them. Then they do all right. Maybe there's that thing, or maybe I need to. But I actually have over the years I've felt that um, helping people to write books and the journeys they go on. And I had a wonderful conversation with Jake, who wrote the recipe. I reached out to him. Well, I reached out to all of my authors. And Because I put so much into it. I give a lot of love and a lot of care, as you know. And So does everybody on my team. You know, I call us the DBI author family. And for me, family is the best team. And, you know, we look out for each other because I've had a family that doesn't. And I asked him, I said, I feel as though I've let you down. And I feel that I'd done something wrong because there was not a lot of sales coming from the book, and we've never pretended that we're a big sales and distribution company. It always has been, you know, we'll help you get published, we'll give you all of the tools and all of the ideas and the coaching to help you get out there and all of the ideas. You've got the 7-week author course if you work with me and blah blah blah. Um, and I said, I just feel as though that sometimes, you know, the conversation, it was like that coaching is a thankless task, that, you know, and it wasn't that I do it to get thanks. I want to help people write books. I love books. They were my savior. They were, but I've realized that my attachment to books is not everybody's attachment to books. Books are my best friends. And it's quite interesting because someone reached out to me once and said your social media profile is very sad, and I was like, really? I mean, yeah, you're never with friends, you're always by yourself or with your dog. And that hit hard because I realized I don't have a lot of friends that just I hang out with. They're all scattered all around the world. And it's not that I don't have friends, but you live like hours away, and we've all got our own lives, and some have got kids, and I'm allergic to children these days. Especially when they're little babies, and I'm like, I remember my friend Ali, who I absolutely adore, and she's got 4 boys. I'm like, holy moly. Um, and she asked me to look after Qasim and Zaki when Zaki was 2 and Carson was just born. She was going back to the hospital, and I'm there and I'm pushing the pushchair through the park near Weston Park in Sheffield, and I'm like, yeah, this is not my life anymore. Like Zaki's there, he's crying and he wants a tissue, and I don't wipe children's noses. There's a tissue, get crack on. Carson was great. He was fast asleep, but it was just that act of pushing and pushing. I think, yeah, I'm done with this life. I am not going back here. I do not want to revisit this. Um, but again, she's so far away. She's got her life, she's got her kids. I had mine apparently really young, although I didn't feel that young. 25 and 29 is not that young to have kids. But again, it was like I knew what I wanted out of life, and I've achieved a lot of that. And I wanted to give that to others, and I want them to succeed. And when I've helped them and I've given them all that, and they haven't achieved what I thought that, and I was like, I was being so unkind to myself, putting
Mm.
all of this pressure on myself. And I was speaking to a colleague, and she was saying, yeah, it's similar. She goes, when she first started out in her field of work, she did it because she was so passionate about it. And she goes, but it's got nothing to, their level of success has got nothing to do with us, Dawn. We do
Mm.
our job, we show up, we give them the tools, and then it's on them. And if they still engage, great. If they don't, then that's up to them. But we are not responsible for their success, and you need to be kind to yourself, Dawn, because here you are doing everything for lots of people, and you're maybe reducing your prices because you really believe in them, and then they come back and smack you in the face, and and all of this, and it was just such a powerful conversation to have.
Mm. And I
And
think that what comes out of that conversation is it comes back to giving more than you have to give.
yeah, I was a Delilah. I had a massive
Mm,
hole in my bucket, and it wasn't the
mm,
top one.
mm. So,
I've got
and
a
I
bit of
think
a
that
bucket
it
monkey.
comes back to, self-awareness and kind of going,
Mm,
okay, so, why am I giving so much to these people?
mm,
Yes, you're passionate about those books, and but if you're giving so much that you end up being depleted by it, then it's not fair, is it? It's not fair to
no.
yourself. And I think, yeah, we get there, don't we, in the end?
We do in the end. And I think that what Jake said to me, he goes, Dawn, what you did for me, because the gift you gave me, he goes, I needed to go and process. Working with you was amazing and so powerful that I'm not the same guy I was and never want to go back to being that man. But if it hadn't have been for you reflecting back to me on my journey, I mean, his book, like it really was eye-opening for me. Is there a recipe about being a US Marine? Um, and his lifestyle had always been one. He grew up, he was told what to do by his parents. Then he went into military college, was told what to do by the lecturers and the captains and the corporals and sergeants and everybody in the academy. Then he was in the military and he was being told what to do then. And then it was that crumbling and figuring himself out when he came out. And the book was part of that process. And it reminded me in so many ways of Estella and the journey that she was taking, and and this is why I said, when Jake was saying, when he gets to that point of, he feels like, what was my point? He goes, I'm here to be of service. I'm still a Marine. I will always be a Marine, and that's a condition that he has. And like, when was he his best Marine? And he taps into that when he's having a moment of weakness, or he forgets who he is and what he's achieved. And it's and this is what I love about the book, Estella. I mean, I told you, like, I actually nearly walked into somebody. I was walking through the airport, laptop open, reading the book, like. And then I remember this woman goes, "You're really, what are you reading?" Because I couldn't stop reading it, and I'm scrolling, and she'd been walking behind me, and I was like, oh my God, you've got to read it. And it turns out her name was Stella. And like we said, and it was because it doesn't matter which stage of life we get to, we can all draw on something like Stella and the kindness we give to ourselves, and the kindness that she's giving to Oscar, and the others. And one of the things that's come up, it's like the generational patterns, like you mentioned about your parents and how they were with you and your brother. And I was like, oh my God, they went to the same school of parenting that my parents went to.
Mm,
You're allowed to
yeah.
come in now. You're allowed
But
to
then
come
you
in
see,
as dad.
when you as you grow up, and if you do end up having a good relationship with your parents, and you ask them about their own childhoods, you then hear this stuff
Mm,
where you kind of go, oh right, well that all makes a whole load of sense then.
mm,
I can see why they wouldn't be comfortable showing affection. I can, because they
mm.
weren't given affection themselves. And also,
Yep.
as you grow up and you understand how the dynamics of their own relationship work, and you think, you see other parents and you see other relationships and you compare them. I just think it all comes back to the same thing, that every single one of us has this highly complex journey that we're on.
Mm,
And if we're on the right track, I do very, very much believe that if we're on the right track and we're going to grow in our lives, then there have to be challenges and there have to be things along the way which do create issues for us. And it's about dealing with those issues, which is what life is about, and how we manage to grow as human beings. So that's why I keep coming back to kindness, because I don't know what other people are dealing with. And whenever I find myself being resentful that I'm not getting back what I'm giving, I have to remind myself that there are people in my life who constantly show kindness towards me, but I'm mistrustful of that kindness. And therefore, perhaps that's what's happening in this situation. So we work on all of these different things. And I often ask myself the whole thing about who benefits from kindness.
Nice.
And when it comes down to it, I can't think of a situation in which nobody benefits from it. And that's why it needs to be a default. And you know, we talked a little bit earlier about you know, when people do terrible things, being kind and trying to understand why they've done it, etc., doesn't mean the same thing as having them as your best friend in your life. So in Estella, something quite shocking happens to her,
Mm,
and she chooses to forgive the person
mm,
for what happens, but she doesn't go on to be as close with that person afterwards
mm,
as she was before. So their relationship has changed slightly, and it needs to change in order to reinforce that the shocking behavior is not acceptable. But she goes on being kind and understanding of that person. And one of the things that I've put into the book is that she has a way of listening to people. And so she settles herself into a position where she's ready to listen to somebody. She's concentrating on them, and she is pushing towards them certain emotions. So when she feels that somebody wants to talk to her and that they've got something that they need to tell her, she gives them space and silence
mm,
to tell her what it is that they want to tell her. But what she pushes across to them is compassion and empathy. And the reason why I use those words particularly is because the key conditions of any therapeutic relationship between a patient and a therapist is that you have compassion, empathy, and unconditional positive regard. And it just occurred to me, having understood the tenets of counselling, that we live in a world where so little of that is on offer that people have to pay somebody to give it to them.
mm,
So that if we could try to do more of that in our lives for other people. At one point in the book, I talk about mythical conversations. So the stuff of legend where two people are having a conversation with one another, and in that conversation, they are both giving each other at the same time empathy, compassion, and unconditional positive regard. And so many conversations are about one person who needs to give some information or release some information, and the other person accepting and reflecting that information back to that person. And then that person feels the satisfaction of that happening, and they feel satisfied, and they're able to walk away from that conversation. And what I would like to see is these mythical conversations where we do the same for each other in the same conversation. Now, in my professional life, that's not how it works.
no.
That's not intended. But with my friends, and I'm very lucky in the sense that I came back to Herefordshire after living here, there, and everywhere. I came back to Herefordshire, and I have friends who I have known since I was 6. I have friends
Mm,
I've known since I was 10. And the ones that have lasted and who are still friends are those in which with whom I can have these mythical conversations. And I think that that's how we choose the people that we invest the most time in is because if we want our bucket to be continually refilled, we have to have those people in our lives. And I'm incredibly lucky that I have 3 people in my life. When I have a conversation with them, it is this wonderful, mythical, almost transcendental experience, because that's what I
Oh, I
get
just
from
got goosebumps
conversations.
then.
Yeah.
I love those
So,
conversations.
and when I decided to start doing work on myself and on my self compassion and my self kindness, it was because they have been asking to do it for decades. And
Mm.
it was about time that I overied up and
Oh,
did it.
breathe.
Yeah.
Oh, no, no, breathe. They arrived today. I'm so
Hooray. Well done.
excited.
Well done. Well
I'm
done.
so excited it's arrived. But yeah, again, that book has taken it out of me. Really
Yeah.
has. And it's shown me a lot. But that's for a different day and a different conversation, which I would love to have another one with you. Now, I want us to wrap up because we've got some journaling questions that we've put together. Um, and for everybody, bear with me, uno momento, because as people know who follow me and watch my YouTube channel, I need a moment to deal with all of the technical stuff. I did have an IT company at one point, but it was not in marketing present. Well, it was, but anyway, different thing. So this is Lara's book, as you can see, the beautiful cover on the front. And we've got some journaling questions here because one of the questions that we wanted to ask, let me just move us out of the way down here. There we go. Oh, it moved it. Oh, it went side by side. Look at that. Um, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because having listened to you, I do feel that I'm more, no, we can't be too kind. Um, so thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I love you. But again, that's why we have these conversations, and that's why I love having conversations with people that I often disagree with or have very different views about, because we get to learn something and we get to shift. And that's why, when people go, oh, it's a community for like-minded people, I'm like, yeah, I don't do like-minded. They're like, what? I'm like, it's just an echo chamber. I don't want to be in an echo chamber. I don't want to be with like-minded people. I want to be with open-minded, respectful people where we can have differences of opinion and grow and learn and evolve with each other. And again, the mythical conversations, because there's so much joy, and then you're like, oh my God, that was amazing. I learned so much. But that's me being a bit of a nerd. And I love that about myself. Um, so we have
As you
things.
should.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, I've written down strategies for kindness to others and then strategies for kindness to self. And one of them is I've written 3 to self because I'd like you to do the ones for others. So I've written down mirror work and positive affirmations. So looking in the mirror, telling yourself that you're a good person, that you've got beautiful eyes, you've got a beautiful smile, and all of these like deep mirror work and holding your gaze. Because I remember when I was in Argentina, I think, when I lived in Argentina. Yes, I was in that fabulous conversation apartment with a remote control toilet, which was a lot of fun. And I don't even know how to use a remote control for a TV. So you can imagine the fun I had with the remote control toilet. But I did a lot of deep mirror work when I lived there. And oh my gosh, did I learn to love myself? All my lumps and bumps in all the right places, and they've kind of moved next door now. But I would also write down a list of 5 new things every single day that I loved about myself. Whether that was my compassion, whether that was my laughter, whether that was my nerd, whether that was the fact that I can't stop wiggling my hips. I can't sit still. I can't watch a movie the whole way through. And I love that about myself. And it is about making sure that we can list all of those 5 new things every single day and be your own best friend. Um, so that's only three so far. So we have to come up with another two, and I need you to come up with five. And we're going to send these out to everybody who's listening and who's staying with us. So these are going to come out to you. My fabulous VA, Tai is going to sort that out because she knows how to do that, all the technical stuff. Where would I be
Well,
without her?
can I add one to your list, which will be
Oh,
on my
yes,
list as well? So
go for
I
it.
think that the real one of the real keys to kindness is listening.
Oh,
So actually listening to yourself and listening to the people that you're talking to. So and being honest about what you hear. So there's a lot of us who don't. There's the stuff we don't want to hear,
mm,
and so I I struggle with that whole thing about loving myself, as I said.
mm,
And I, for many years, had an ongoing earache. And I'm pretty sure that the earache was all to do with the fact that I didn't like hearing anything positive said about myself, and I couldn't say positive stuff about myself. So it was things that
Diseasing
I
from
didn't want to hear.
voice.
So, and I think before we start with anything, before we say anything, do anything, um, start anything, we actually have to be listening to know what it is that we need to do. So,
Mm,
particularly when you're choosing about who you're going to be kind to and in what way you're going to be kind, you need to be listening to them and you need to be
mm,
listening to what they're saying to you. But you need to be listening to them also in what they're not saying to you.
yes, yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
and then also reading body language. So it is that moment of quiet where you kind of go, okay, yeah, you have these intuitions or whatever about what this person needs or what you should be doing in this situation, but actually just shut the fuck up, listen, watch, and work out if your intuition is right or not.
Mm. I like that, and I've added an extra word on it, listening actively,
Yeah, yeah.
rather than listening to respond, because there's so many people that they don't listen, they're not present to the listening. They're not present to that conversation, which is one of the reasons why sometimes I find it really difficult to interrupt somebody because I'm listening so presently to what they're saying. And I was explaining to someone once, it just feels like there's an opening right in front of me. It's like, just fill me up, just fill me up with your wisdom, your ideas. And then I'm like, okay, right, and then I can reflect back to them. And sometimes I'm so engrossed in what people are saying that I forget that I'm actually having a conversation with them. And then they've gone off and and they're like, like you said, maybe I need reining in. Because I just love listening. And obviously as a coach, you're trained to listen. Someone said to me, you talk a lot. I'm like, I don't actually. I mean, I talk to myself a lot. I talk to Chewy a lot. But because I am by myself with the dog most of the time, I don't get to have a lot of conversations. Like I
Well,
said, with my
that's the thing about living on your own.
yes,
So I sometimes say to my work colleagues on a Monday, really sorry, haven't spoken to anyone for about 48 hours, so I might be a bit motor mouth this morning. But yeah, so yeah, but I think that the listening actively is really important. Yeah,
mm,
definitely.
excellent. So we have four on my list and one on yours. So now we need to, as we go through these journaling questions, so these are the 10 questions that Lara and I, you know, as we've been percolating, bringing this event together. We would like you will get these sent out to you as a PDF, as I said, by fabulous Tai. Honestly, I wouldn't know what I'd have done without her this year. She's absolutely amazing. Um, Goodness gracious. Um, so when have I said yes to something, even though I wanted to say no? What motivated that choice and how did it affect me? So we want you to consider that because no is also a full sentence. It doesn't need an explanation. It is no. I'd like to just add that. I can see Lara smiling down the bottom there. So I'm trying to keep my eye on her facial things while her facial reactions while I'm reading this, and that's why I keep looking down in the corner because you're down there now. And also, can my kindness sometimes feel manipulative, either consciously or unconsciously? And how does that show up in my relationships? I'd also like to add, how does that show up with the relationship with myself? So that would be something there. Are you manipulating and fooling yourself by being kind?
I
Because
think I
remember,
think that these two questions are very much linked to one another.
they
So
are.
I think it all comes back to motivation, doesn't it? So
Mm,
and I think that's something that it's sometimes difficult for us to be completely honest about.
mm,
So yeah, there are lots of things that we don't want to do, and we end up saying yes to doing them. And what is our motivation to do that? And sometimes it is the motivation is kindness. So if I think back to the years that I cared for my mum and dad, the things that I did at that time, there were things I didn't want to do, but I
mm,
also knew how happy those things would make my parents.
mm.
And, getting old is not nice. And if you know that somebody is struggling with their aging and with how they feel, and you can do something that will cost you not too much physically and emotionally, then you might say yes to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But then when we get to the second question on that page, then that's also affected by that as well.
Yeah.
So is it sometimes manipulative? Because sometimes we choose to do something because we think we're going to gain something from it.
Mm,
And, and I think possibly if I'm really, really honest about it, when I said yes to doing things that I didn't want to do for my parents, I think that there was a certain amount of me that thought there's a certain part of me that thought that they would love me more if I did do it.
mm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I hear you loudly on quite a few bits of those. Like I do the daughterly thing. I contact my parents, although I'm always a lamb to the slaughter, and it's probably best that I don't do it for my mental health. But the dutiful daughter in me, like my mum, like you said, I understand their journey. I know things about their journey. I know, and so it's like put it aside. They love you in their own way. Probably doesn't present the way I'd like it. Um, I know I trigger the hell out of them. A lot of people. That's why I have a mug with. I come with a trigger warning. Um, but anyway, the next questions. Do I feel that being too kind has ever caused more harm to myself or to others? And in what situations? When have I avoided challenges or growth opportunities because staying comfortable felt kinder to myself or to others? And that question reminds me of the student that you spoke to. Was he avoiding the challenges of growth because of an element of kindness? Because I remember someone asking me, don't you think that your level of success is intimidating for your children? And I was like a bit taken back. I was like, okay, straight on the phone, boys. Just been asked a question. Again, when you're in the public eye and you get asked some really random questions, it's like, okay, I don't know. I'll have to go back and ask them. I've never even considered that. Again,
That
was the
is that is a common theme in literature, though. That is a common theme in literature, that how children of successful people choose to conduct their lives
mm,
under the shadow of that success.
mm.
Mm.
So yeah, are we being kind to people by avoiding not putting our light too brightly and overshadowing others, or vice versa? A different scenario there. Now, this one is about, as we mentioned, the setting boundaries. I know that my mother and I, we challenge each other, so we put a nice distance between us. We're both far enough away for no surprise visits. But if she called me up and said, I need you, I'd be on the first train home. Um, do I believe that setting boundaries or saying no makes me unkind? Why not? And how might my acts of self-kindness sometimes hold me back financially, emotionally, or professionally. So yeah. Also, it could be seen as self-sabotage. So there's something there. Again, what you'll see is that these questions are coupled together for very
For a
hopefully
reason, yeah.
good reasons. And in my relationships, do I feel guilt when prioritizing my own needs? And what patterns or belief contribute to that guilt? What's the backstory? What is that story that we're telling ourselves that actually leads to the guilt? Or what inner child work can we do? Like we were saying with mine and Lara's 7-year-olds behave very differently. And so, as does Estella, the things that have been going on in our lives might be very similar generationally, influences. What is it about? What is it that's led to your guilt? Um, and how do I balance between being generous with protecting myself and where do I feel tension or conflict in this balance? Um, I think they're very powerful journaling questions. They actually confronted me whilst I was like, oh, I'm going to ask that one. I'm going to be journaling tonight. Um, and the final two, how can I tell the difference between true kindness and enabling behavior for myself and others? And also, what is one small concrete act of boundary setting I could practice this week that still aligns with kindness and integrity? So, what do you think to those journaling questions there, Lara?
Well, I think that if you're really being honest with yourself, you can go a long way with those questions.
Yeah,
But it's about being really, really
really
honest.
honest. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
some of those things might be quite difficult to face up to.
Yeah. And actively listening to our bodies. I know that, we both love Tracy and the work her and Tim do at Trinity Coherence, who you actually also mention in the book. And what where do we, when we're feeling that guilt or when we're feeling that resistance, and it's work that, I've done many times before, but again, it's like different people, the way they present different things to us, or maybe the way that they present the same thing we've already heard before, the way they present it, it just helps everything just unravel. And you're like, oh, now I feel it. Now I get
But
it.
there's also a sense of timing, though.
Absolutely.
That our journeys are, we have our own timing on our
Mm.
journeys, and
And when we're
um,
ready.
and if we don't have time to go into it at the moment, but if in your human design is to flourish in your later years, which mine is. What's happened in the last 2-3 years for me has happened at exactly the right time. I needed to have this body of experience in order to get to the place where I am now,
Mm.
and in order to get Estella all packaged up and ready as a story that's great to read, but also there's a lot to take away from in it.
Mm.
So I've tried writing novels since I was about 25 and never achieved anything that was anywhere near what Estella is. So it's about, I think so much of it is about timing.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely. And speaking of Estella, you can, Lara has this QR code for you all for you to order your exclusive signed copy by her very hand. You can get it in my favorite format, the nice hardback there. We can get it in paperback. You can also get it on an ebook. I have never had an ebook. I don't even have a Kindle because writing and editing so many books, I actually really quite like to hold them and then open them up and go, that's nice. So, yes, if you like to smell a good book, then make sure that you order a signed copy from Lara. And if you are an ebooker, do get that as well. Um, get all three. Um, but you can order it using this QR code here. And I would just love to say thank you so much, Lara, for your time. And for those
Thank
of you
you.
who have been watching, thank you for being with us and for the time that you spent with us while Lara shares her wisdom with us all. It is an incredible book. I knew I love it for so many reasons. And I have been told that I am a bit of a book snob. Well, yes, I am. I know own that. That's one of the things that I love about myself. I love great literature, and there are going to be more conversations with Lara about different events in the book as we move forward throughout next year. So, from me, those of you who are celebrating winter solstice, have a wonderful time at 21st of December. Those of you who are celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas. Eid is also coming up just after Christmas, and I believe, is it today's Hanukkah as well? So, for whatever you're celebrating, whether it be a religious ceremony, whether it be a seasonal one, um, whether it just be yourself, and just because you've woken up today, which is always a great thing to do, just be at peace and be kind. Any last words from you, Lara?
No, thank you very much. And yeah, absolutely. Be kind.
Yeah. All right, then. Thank you so much. Ciao for now.
Bye bye.